So, like this, with reference to cell, the osmosis can either be inward or outward depending on the extent of concentration of the solutions surrounding it. So, what do you mean by end osmosis? End osmosis is the inward movement of water molecule through the semi-permeable membrane of a cell, which leads to the increase in size of a cell. That is what we call it as end osmosis. It is inward movement of water molecule through the semi-permeable membrane of a cell leading to a increase in size of the cell. And it always takes place when the surrounding solution is less concentrated. And if it is less concentrated on the surrounding, then it is called as hypotonic. Whereas just the opposite happens in exosmosis. It is the outward movement of water molecule through the semi-permeable membrane of a cell leading to the shrinkage of cell, and it takes place when the surrounding solution is more concentrated. That means hypertonic solution. See, the lesser the solute concentration, less is the osmotic pressure and more is the osmotic movement. Try to understand. Osmosis can occur in any direction. See, always osmosis depends on three reasons. That is concentration of a solution, amount of a solute in a liquid, and osmotic pressure. So, it's said that the lesser the solute concentration, less is the osmotic pressure and more is the osmotic movement. Osmotic pressure is always inversely proportional to osmotic movement. Less the pressure, more the movement. So, see, take an example. If a cell is kept in a hypotonic solution, hypotonic means, hypo means here the surrounding solution is less concentrated. That means with low solute concentration and low osmotic pressure. It will gain water from the surrounding medium and tends to swell up. But whereas a cell placed in a hypertonic solution, hyper means the surrounding solution is having more concentration. So they will give out water from the surrounding medium and it tends to shrink. Now let me give an example for you all. Have you all have observed when this dried grapes, or what do we call it as raisins, they are immersed in water, they swell up after some time. Why? Because the water is hypotonic in medium and the grapes absorb water by the phenomenon of osmosis. Shrinkage grapes or dried grapes, but the concentration inside the grape is more, but the surrounding water is less concentrated. So the grapes will absorb the water due to osmosis. The other example is if a fresh grape is put in a 20% sugar solution, or sugar solution means hypertonic, so they shrink, the grapes will shrink. Why? Because the concentration in the inside the grape is is less than the surrounding solution. So this is because of the loss of water from the grapes. So this net movement of water molecule or water takes place in both the direction across the semi-permeable membrane, and this movement continues till an equilibrium has reached and the rate of movement is same in both the directions. Like that, depending upon these two directions, there are two types of movement, like inward movement is endosmosis, outward movement is exosmosis. So based on this, let us have an example or an experiment which is there on your page number 40. See, it's given, take some concentrated sugar solution in a thistle funnel. Did you see the thistle funnel here? So as I told you, cover the mouth of the thistle funnel with a cellophane paper, or that cellophane paper means it's a membrane which is called as a plasma membrane, or taken as a plasma membrane here. Here you can take a membrane of an egg or an animal bladder in the form of this plasma membrane, or a hindrance or an obstacle, and tie it securely. Now invert the thistle funnel in a beaker containing water and suspend it in the water contained in the beaker. Now mark the level of the sugar solution on the stem of the thistle funnel, and this is the experimental setup. Now as a control, take another thistle funnel with the plain water and also containing only water. Again mark the level on its stem. So what will you observe? After a few hours, the level of the sugar solution in the Thistle funnel in the experimental setup will rise. Second thing we will observe that the level of water in the Thistle funnel is in the control will remain unchanged or no changes, and the level of water in the beaker in the experiment will drop slightly while the one in the beaker in the control will remain unchanged. Now if the water in the beaker in the experimental setup is tasted, it is not found sweet. These are the observations which we see when we conduct the experiment for the osmosis. Now what are the three main conclusions what we get from this experiment? It says that in this experimental setup, some water of the beaker has passed through the cellophane paper to enter the Thistle funnel containing the sugar solution, and sugar from the Thistle funnel has not passed into the beaker. And the third thing is the cellophane paper has acted as a selectively or differentially permeable membrane. Already I have discussed what is permeability and semi-permeability. It has allowed water molecules to pass through but not the sugar molecule. This is what we call it as differentially permeable or semi-permeable membrane. So let us see a modified version of the same experiment. What is that modified version? The experimental setup by taking a more concentrated sugar solution in the Thistle funnel and very dilute or less concentrated sugar solution in the beaker. The result would still be the same, that is the level of the solution in the Thistle funnel would rise, and this again is because some water from the less concentrated sugar solution in the beaker would move into the more concentrated sugar solution in the Thistle funnel by or through the cellophane paper, which acts as a semi-permeable membrane. So this is how the modified version of second experiment. Now if we take a rubber sheet or a muslin cloth instead of that cellophane paper which is acting as a barrier, what would be the changes in the experiment? See, rubber sheet and muslin cloth, they are also used in the place of cellophane paper. Okay, now what will be the changes you see? If the setup we had used a rubber sheet in another similar experiment or setup, a muslin cloth instead of cellophane as in the above experiment, what would happen? See, obviously there will be no change in the level of sugar solution because it would occur in the first case. The rubber sheet is impermeable. Rubber sheet is impermeable, whereas cellophane paper was permeable. See the difference. Rubber sheet is impermeable and would not allow the water molecule from the beaker to cross over the other side. So no osmosis. The same thing in the second case, if you take a muslin cloth, they are having so large holes or large pores. So what will happen? This water will freely, they would not hold back only any water or sugar molecules, and the entire sugar solution will flow down to a common level. So this is why the cellophane paper is taken in place of a rubber sheet or a muslin cloth. Rubber sheet won't allow any of the water molecule to cross, and muslin cloth will allow everything to cross. So this is the difference between the cellophane paper, rubber sheet and muslin cloth. So muslin cloth is therefore freely permeable for sugar solution. Now the same experiment can be performed by using a whisking bag. Whisking bag again is a semi-permeable membrane which is shown in the figure 4.5 on page number 41. So what happened here? Place the sugar solution in a knotted whisking bag instead of taking the Thistle funnel. The previous experiments we have taken the Thistle funnel, but now here without taking the Thistle funnel, only a test tube like a tube is or a capillary tube is connected with a whisking bag, and this whisking bag is inserted with a long glass capillary tube till some of the sugar solution rises in the capillary tube. Now the same type, only the thing is that in place of Thistle funnel, here we have taken the whisking bag. Now tie the mouth of the bag firmly around the capillary tube and support it on the clamp stand. Now immerse the whisking bag in a beaker with water, and after an hour the level of sugar in the capillary tube will rise. And this rise is due to the water molecules diffusing through the wall of the whisking bag. This is how the same experiment is conducted in different changing the different components. First it has changed the cellophane papers, then a second thing it has taken the rubber sheet, third thing it has taken the muslin cloth, fourth thing he has taken the whisking bag. But the same experiment is repeated again and again. So there are two key points in the above experiments. What is it? See, there are two liquids of different concentrations. One is the sugar solution, which has a higher concentration of sugar molecule, whereas there may be fewer or no sugar molecule in the beaker. It's very important to understand that the concentration can be visualized from the side of the solvent. That is, if there are more water molecule in the unit volume of the beaker than in the same volume of sugar solution in the Thistle funnel. So, thus there are two reasons of different concentration or tonicity, which we may express in the following ways. First is the two reasons of different concentration of water molecule, or the two reasons of the different concentration of sugar molecule. So, the two liquids are separated by a cellophane paper which behaves like a semi-permeable membrane, and a semi-permeable membrane is one which allows the passage of molecules selectively. It allows a solvent, that is the water molecule, to pass through it freely, but prevents the passage of solute or the salt or sugar molecules in the. How long can osmosis continue? So see, theoretically osmosis should continue until the concentration of water molecule becomes equal on both the sides of the membrane, isn't it? When we spoke about the grapes or the resins, until and unless inside the resin the concentration is equal to the outside concentration, it should continue the osmosis. So here let us see what happens actually. Osmosis should continue until the concentration of water molecule becomes equal on both the sides of the membrane. That's why that condition is called as isotonic. But in the experiment shown in figure 4.4, the column of sugar solution in the Thistle funnel keeps rising upward with the influx of water from the beaker, and with it the height and weight of this column of solution would also increase. Such an increase in the height and weight of the rising column reduces further osmosis. So a stage will be reached when no osmosis occurs even if the concentration of water molecule is not the same on the two sides of the membrane. And in this state of equilibrium, the water molecules from the beaker tend to force upwards through the movement or through the membrane, but the weight or the pressure from the above holds them down. Now, what is osmotic pressure actually? Osmotic pressure means, see, during osmosis, the molecule of water move from the area of higher concentration to the area of lower concentration through a semi-permeable membrane. So, as the water molecule continue to move from the beaker to the funnel, the rising liquid column exerts a hydrostatic pressure on the inner wall of the Thistle funnel. So, this pressure which restricts and prevents the entry of water molecule through the semi-permeable membrane is called as the osmotic pressure. Simultaneously, the water molecule also exerts a force on the outer wall of the funnel to diffuse it. So, as a result, the movement of water continues till the pressure becomes equal on both the sides and an equilibrium state is reached. So, if we are asked what is the definition of osmotic pressure, then we can write the pressure exerted by a solution to prevent the entry of water molecule through the semi-permeable membrane is called as osmotic pressure. Okay, this is what we call it as osmotic pressure. Now, osmotic pressure is also the minimum pressure that must be exerted to prevent the passage of the pure solvent into the solution when the two are separated by a semi-permeable membrane, or you can write very simply, the osmotic pressure of a solution is a measure of its tendency to take in water by osmosis. Now, our next topic is tonicity. Now, what is this tonicity? It's relative concentration of the solution that determines the direction and extent of diffusion is called tonicity. So, this tonicity is again based on its solution which are of three types, like isotonic, hypotonic and hypertonic. What is this isotonic actually? Iso means the same and toni means this concentration. Iso means same concentration on both the side. The relative concentration of water molecule and the solute on the either side of the cell membrane is the same. In such a solution, there is no net movement of water molecule across the cell membrane. So, there will be no osmosis if the solution is isotonic. Next comes our hypotonic. Hypo means less or lower. In this condition, the solution outside the cell has a lower solute concentration than the fluid inside the cell. And as a result, the water molecule from outside will move into the cell called as the end osmosis. That is what we call it as hypotonic. If hypotonic is there in the solution, end osmosis will be seen. The same thing if it is hypertonic, in this condition the solution outside the cell has a higher solute concentration and the fluids inside the cell, and consequently the water molecule from the interior of the cell wall will move out. Out means exosmosis. So if the solution is hypertonic, there will be exosmosis. If the solution is hypotonic, the condition will be end osmosis. So to understand the above three conditions, we may suppose that RBC or a red blood cell or a plant cell which has been kept in three different kinds of solution as shown in the figure in your book of page number 43, figure 4.8. You can go through the conditions, three conditions. So we see the results which are as follows. You see, number A, cell shape and size remains unchanged if the solution outside is isotonic. Did you see the figure? Isotonic solution, water entering the cell equals the water leaving it, so it is isotonic in nature. Now in the B, which is the cell is placed in a hypertonic solution, water entering the cell is less than the water leaving it, so the cell shrinks in size and loses its shape and the solution outside is hypertonic. Now third case is hypotonic. Hypotonic means water is entering the cell, exceeds the water leaving it. So here the cell slightly enlarges or even bursts. So the solution outside is hypotonic in nature. Now when fully distended, the cell is called turgid, which it cannot withstand any further inflow of water molecules. Turgid means it is the condition of the cell where it cannot accommodate a single drop of water inside. That means if the condition of turgidity is being attained, the next condition is just it will burst. So in the case of plant cells, another striking feature determines the behavior of the cell when subjected to varying external environments, fluid environments. So this feature is rigidity of the cell wall or resistance of the cell wall till how much it can absorb water. So this resists, bulges and protects the delicate cellular parts inside, and the phenomenon related to this behavior are turgidity, plasmolysis and flaccidity, which is again described later in this section 4.45. So let us see what is turgidity, what is plasmolysis and flaccidity after a short while. But before that, let us understand what is active and passive. Now what is this active transport? So it is the movement of substance against the concentration gradient, that is from the region of the lower concentration to the region of the higher concentration, and this always requires energy which is supplied by ATP. I think you do remember the full form of ATP, that is adenosine triphosphate molecules present in the cell, and generally special proteins called carrier proteins are used to transport the molecules from one side of the membrane to the other. For example, transport of mineral ions across the membrane of the root hair cell is against a concentration gradient, that is from the lower concentration in the soil to a high concentration inside the cell, which is facilitated by a carrier protein. So what happens here, certain nutrients such as ions of nitrate, sulfates, potassium, zinc, manganese, etc. cannot pass through the cell membrane of the root cell. So what we require here? Again, a force is required, a carrier protein is required, and this is because the concentration is higher inside the root cell. It is so maintained in order to develop osmotic pressure for absorbing water, and in this way the concentration gradient of these ions is opposite to that of the diffusion. In other words, we can also say that to obtain them, these ions will have to be forcibly carried inward from the region of the lower concentration outside to the region of the higher concentration inside, and this requires energy supplied by the cell in the form of ATP. Next comes our passive transport. See, passive transport is nothing different from diffusion. It refers to the requiring no input of energy only. So passive transport does not require any energy expenditure. the movement of water molecule is from high concentration to low concentration, that is towards the gradient. So there is a free movement of molecule from their higher concentration to the lower concentration. This is what we call it as passive absorption. Turgidity and flaccidity, which is also called as plasmolysis. Now, you see, every living plant cell directly or indirectly is in contact with the fluids. The root hair in particular is surrounded by soil water, and all such cells are subjected to osmosis, and water continues to enter as long as the cell sap is more concentrated than the surrounding fluid. So what happens when a cell reaches a state where it cannot accommodate any more water? It is fully distended, or it is called turgid, and the solution, or sorry, the condition is called as turgidity. Whereas when a cell is in turgid, its walls are stretched under pressure from inside, and in turn it presses the cell contents towards the center of the cell. This is what we call it as turgor pressure. So it is the pressure of the cell content on the cell wall. Pressure of the cell content on the cell wall is called as turgor pressure, and the pressure exerted by the cell wall on the cell content is called as the wall pressure. So if at any time the cell wall is unable to bear the turgor pressure, it ruptures and the cell contents burst out. This is exactly what happens when a fruits or vegetables sometimes burst when ripened. Now, when turgid, the cell is in a somewhat balanced state. No more water is entering or leaving in it. So its turgor pressure counterbalances the wall pressure, and therefore there is no further absorption of water, even though the concentration of solute inside the cell may be greater than the outside the. So if this plant cell is now kept in 5% salt solution for a few minutes, it will lose its distended appearance. The cytoplasm will shrink and the plasma membrane will withdraw the water from the cell wall. So the shrinkage form from the cell wall is called as the plasmolysis, and the cells in this state are said to be limp or flaccid. So this condition is called as flaccidity. Flaccidity is just the opposite of turgidity or reverse of turgidity. If, however, a plasmolysed cell or a flaccid cell is returned to water before it is dead, its protoplasm again swells up, pressing tight against the cell wall. And the recovery or the reversal of plasmolysis is called as the deplasmolysis. So you can easily understand that plasmolysis is the result of outflow of water from the cell, and deplasmolysis is the result of re-entry. That is what we call it as plasmolysis and deplasmolysis. Now, turgidity, its definition is the state of a cell in which the cell wall is rigid and stretched by an increase in the volume of vacuoles due to the absorption of water, and the cell is then said to be turgid. Whereas plasmolysis is the contraction of cytoplasm from the cell wall caused due to withdrawal of water when placed in a strong or a hypertonic solution. And flaccidity is the opposite of turgidity, that is, it's a condition in which the cell content is shrunken and the cell is no more tight. The cell is then said to be flaccid in condition. So let us understand the uses of turgidity to the plants. For what role is played by this turgidity for the plants? The turgidity provides rigidity to soft tissues such as the leaves. When there is not enough water in a leaf, it wilts or it shrinks. That is, its petiole and lamina becomes loose and the leaf droops down. This is how it gives rigidity to the soft tissues of the leaves. See, wilting of the leaves is usually noticed when a plant is exposed to the hot afternoon sun, when some amount of water is lost during transpiration and is more than the water absorbed through the roots. Now, in the evening, when transpiration is reduced, the quantity of water absorbed exceeds the loss of water through transpiration, and turgidity of the leaf cell is restored and the leaves again stand out. So this is how the turgidity is providing the rigidity to the soft tissues to withstand in the conditions. Now let us see in that box, page number 45, plasmolysis in practice. See, in your kitchen also we do this type of plasmolysis. What is that? Salting of meat or addition of salt to pickles is a method of killing bacteria by plasmolysis. That means if we add salt, it will remove all the bacteria or in the form of water. Water is drawn out of the bacterial cell and the bacteria dies. Thus the meat or the pickles, they remain fresh till longer. Now weeds can be killed in a playground by sprinkling excessive salts around their base, isn't it? So excessive application of fertilizer in the agricultural field may also may similarly damage the roots and diminish the yield. This is what? Due to plasmolysis. Salting of meat, addition of salt, weeds killing, sprinkling of excess of this fertilizers, all are due to plasmolysis. Now second condition is turgor pressure helps to push the hard ground as in mushroom and in a seedling, which is given in figure 4.10. Sometimes the roots of certain trees have been seen to crack the wall or a concrete floor of an adjoining building. Even at school also sometimes you would have seen in the cracks of the buildings there will be plants growing up. This again is due to the turgor pressure. The third thing is the turgor in root cells builds up root pressure. Cut a well-watered potted plant, for example a balsam plant, a few centimeters above the soil and immediately fix a glass tubing to it by means of a rubber connection. Water will start coming out of the cut end of the stem and rise up in the glass tubing. This rising water can raise the mercury filled in a connected manometer. And this upward flow of water is due to the heavy pressure from the roots, which is called as the root pressure. What happens here? A fresh potted plant. Just it was live, but now for the experiment it has been freshly cut. Now attach this stem to a tube which is containing a tube which is made of glass and it is in the form of manometer where the mercury is there. What will happen? Suddenly if you cut that and attach it to the manometer, you will see that still water oozes out through the stem and it raises the level of mercury. That means what? That this turgor pressure in the root cells is having so much pressure that it still gives some pressure and it lifts the level of water. That is what? Turgor in root cells builds up root pressure. And root pressure is the pressure developed in the roots due to continued inward movement of water through cell to cell osmosis, which helps in the ascent of sap upward through the stem. And due to the root pressure, water can rise in the tube up to a certain height only. So loss of water or cell sap through a cut stem is called bleeding. Mark it up this one. Like we human beings are bleeding, the plants also bleed. That means if you cut the stem, that time the water comes out. Loss of water in the form of cell sap which comes out from the cut stem is called as bleeding. Turgor in the opening and closing of stomata. So as you have already studied about stomata in class 9th, the opening and closing depends on the turgidity of the guard cells. Do you remember the guard cells? Bean-shaped guard cells. So each guard cell has a thicker wall on the side facing the stoma and a thinner wall on the opposite side. Guard cells contain chloroplasts and as a result the synthesis of glucose during photosynthesis and some other chemical changes, the osmotic pressure of the contents of the guard cell increases and they absorb more water from the neighboring cells, thus becoming turgid. On account of turgor, the guard cells becomes more arched outwards and the aperture between them widens, thereby opening the stomata. So at night or when there is no shortage of water in the leaf, the guard cells turns flaccid and their inner rigid walls become straight, thus closing the stomatal aperture. This is how turgor pressure also helps in the opening and closing of stomata. The next thing is turgor movement. You would have seen the plant called Mimosa pudica or touch me not, isn't it? So what happens? Once we touch it, it droops its leaves. And that rapid drooping of the leaves of the sensitive plant is an outstanding example of turgor movement. If one of the leaf is touched, even lightly, the leaflets will fold up within 2 to 3 seconds and the entire leaf will droop down. Now, if the leaf is touched somewhat strongly, the wave of folding and drooping spreads from from the stimulated leaf to all neighboring leaves. If you touch it very harshly, then all the leaves will close. Slowly the leaves recover and again stand erect after some time. So in this, the plant, the stimulus of touch leads to the loss of turgor at the base of the leaflets and at the base of the petiole called as the pulvinus. Now somewhat similar turgor movement are found in insectivorous plants whose leaves close up to entrap a living prey. Some other experiments like the bending of certain flowers towards the sun, like the sunflower, you might have seen the bending movement of these flowers towards the sun and the sleeping movement of the leaves of certain plant at night are also due to turgor movement. This is what we call it as turgor movement. Now imbibition and turgor together generate much force. See, imbibition is the passive absorption of water by substances such as cellulose in cell wall and starch, and turgor is the pressure set up inside the plant cell due to hydrostatic pressure on the cell wall on account of incoming water as a result of endosmosis. So what happens here? The seeds and grains swell up when soaked in water due to imbibition and endosmosis. So the force generated by the water thus absorbed is strong enough to make the seed coats burst. So some other observed examples we can give as soaked seeds when kept in a fully filled closed container bursts it open with a great pressure. And basement godowns fully stocked with bags containing food grain have got their walls cracked after the rainwater has flooded in. So this is what imbibition and turgor pressure generate more force.